How's everybody doing? You guys ready for a great conversation? Let's get this going. The conversation before, Ben, was incredible.
Yeah, I missed it. I was at my daughter's talent show, so at school. So I missed it. But I heard John did fantastic and the rest of the panel. John is a guy that I know very well, but I heard everything was amazing.
Took a lot away, especially being a parent to an 8, a 4, and a 5-month-old. So very good information, guys. Really appreciate the insight. But Ben, we're going to kick it off. We're going to continue the conversation on resilience. Obviously, there's a lot of things that you faced, trials, tribulations, adversity, as we navigate this thing we call life, right? And so one of the first things I want to talk to you about is resilience in real life versus highlight reels, right? And so I want to know what habits, supports actually helped you bounce back during tough times.
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously my context was sports, and a lot of the youth in the area are involved in that. I know you were involved in it as a young person, but that was where I built the foundation for resilience for my. I was from a small community, not this close to a big city like Nashville, but about 5,000 people, so a small town. A lot of people there that just kind of watched over the young, and we didn't have travel sports like that, like there is today. It wasn't the context that it was when I was going through grade school and middle school and high school. But what was built in me, well, let me first say this. What I loved about sports was the drama of it, right? Because in a game, you could experience the high, the low, you could have a great moment, have hard moments, but I loved that kind of drama of it. And I do think that sports, because there's zero-sum games and there's always a winner and a loser, generally, unless you're playing soccer, there's usually a winner and a loser, and you kind of know that. That's part of what I think I loved about sports and what people love about sports is it's clear-cut at the end of the day. But with that drama comes a lot of intensity. Right? And so one of the things that I learned early on through my dad, who was a military guy, and some of you that are in an older generation will understand the importance of this, I had to have a level of stoicism to keep performing. There was a level of let's not get too high, not get too low, let's not let the extremes or the intensity of the moment change who you are out on the field, what you're trying to do. So that is one of the fundamental bases for being a great athlete, is you can't let the high and the low change how well you're hitting and being ready for the next moment. So one of the things I learned early on is consistency. How within the intensity of the moment can you stay very consistent? Well, I learned early on you kind of have to shove down the emotions, right? The emotions are going to make you feel the ride of the wave, and then you have to find a way to move past whatever felt very emotional and get into the next moment, because even in a game like baseball, it's happening very quickly. The plays, in between the plays, the next moment to be ready. Even though you just may have made an error or struck out or something, you got to move on. The game moves on, and you have to. So part of what helped me was my parents being like, or my dad being like, hey, to be tough mentally in your sport, you have to be able to meet the next moment regardless of what just happened. And I think regardless of whether you're playing sports or not, that is an important thing to learn as you mature, is the moment may not be waiting for you to deal with it. It's probably happening. The next moment's already happening. So I talk about being in like a heroic mode versus a human mood and mode. And so when I'm in that hero mode, I have to meet the next moment right away. If I want to be good for my team or kind of win the game, you kind of have to stay in that hero mode, regardless of what the human felt, and just move on and do it quickly. So a lot of my probably resilience as an athlete came from moving on quickly from failure and being present in the very next moment. So presence is something obviously all of you that are in this world know is very, very important, staying present. So I think I learned early on how to be present. But I did that, in my opinion, in somewhat of a dysfunctional way. So I think I was very consistent in regard to the way I approached my sport and the ups and the downs. It was like, hey, no matter what happened, You got to get back to the focus of the next moment. The ball is coming back to you, so you got to be ready for it. And so in that way, I was able to move past failure very quickly. And I think if I had big failures, that's the part that I wish I would have done different. Even successes, I wish I would have done that different because I never actually truly enjoyed the game as much as I could have had I been able to sit with a great game or sit with a great championship moment or something like that. I did not do that very well. And so there's this level of resilience that I think comes from you got to be consistent, you got to be present, you got to stay focused in what the game is asking you to do. But then how do you rewind the tape as a human after the game in a moment when things slow down? Because now we're not playing the game. It's not a zero. Life is not a zero-sum game. So how do we get back to presence with the human who just kind of was drugged through that as the hero took them through that?
No, I appreciate you sharing that. So when somebody's on that stock market, right, they're going up, down, and they're in that hero zone, what could be a tangible takeaway for somebody just to start that process and to being able to learn how to navigate and balance those emotions?
I think a tangible takeaway to start with that is to have a space, which I did not have as a young athlete. I didn't even have it as a pro athlete. To have a space afterwards to go back and be with someone that I trusted that was able to walk me through a level of, okay, that part of the game seemed pretty difficult. How did you experience that? Or, man, you had an incredibly successful moment. How are you experiencing that? Is it difficult to come down from that high of the adrenaline high in the moment to get back to like a level that's sustainable?
Yeah, so it's really identifying and creating a pause, which ultimately creates awareness around what's going on for you to process what you're going through. Absolutely. I love that. Well, going back to talking about people that we can trust, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about mentorship. Obviously, mentors have played a vital role in my life. And I'd be curious to know from your side, what adult connections and or mentors were the most productive for you growing up during your career, or just in general?
Yeah, well, I would first mention my dad because he was very important in the foundation of learning how to be a good athlete, but also to share a story about him that I think when I look back, it made a huge difference, even though I didn't quite realize the difference it was making at the time. When I was about 12 years old, I had a bruised kidney. So if anybody's ever had something like that, it was pretty scary for me as a kid. My parents were like, "How did you do this?" And I said, "I have no idea. I don't know what happened." But I was a very rambunctious kid. I must have been doing something, whether it was in sports or outside, that hurt myself. And I remember the doctors said, you have to take 2 weeks off of sports, and it was in the middle of the summer. So I was like, had to miss 2 weeks of games, practices, anything. I wasn't allowed to do anything rambunctious. So I was kind of like really bored for 2 weeks. When my parents would normally kick me outside, it was like, hey, you got to sit down, you got to not do much, you can't cause this to get worse. So when I came back to the field of play after 2 weeks, my dad was one of the coaches on that team, and I remember doing our pregame stuff. We would do like warming up and do an infield, outfield with the team. And he saw something different in me. And he pulled me to the side after that and he goes, hey, I can tell you're not comfortable. I can tell that something's wrong, that you're looking really tentative. This is not like what you normally do. Like, let's talk about that. And I was just like, well, the doctor, I hurt myself before, so I don't know if I'm going to hurt myself again. And I'll never forget the way he addressed that. He goes, listen, is there risk that you could get hurt again? Sure, there always is. But the doctor told you that you are well, you're fine, you're healed from that issue. But in addition to that, he said, God is sovereign over this. So part of what enables us to play free is to have faith that you can play with complete freedom. You can go out there and crush it and do everything you did before. And we trust that if something happens, we're going to take care of it again. But we trust that it's probably not going to happen. That's the way you have to play, is that this is a one-time thing. And, let's just not worry that it's going to happen again. Just get back out there with faith and believe that you can do it. And I think from what he says is it was fine. And I was like a little blip in the radar of my youth sports experience. So I do think infusing a level of, hey, there's some knowledge here. The doctor says you're okay. Like let's stay with reality here. Everything is fine. And I hear you. It's normal to be afraid in this moment, but let's have some faith to kind of try to overcome that fear that things are going to work out just fine.
So obviously your dad played an instrumental role in that mentorship. Is there any other people that played a vital role in a leadership standpoint that created that sense of connectivity for you that helped provide guidance and direction as you were navigating life?
Yeah, well, fast forwarding, when I was actually in professional baseball, I had, it doesn't matter like what age you're at, right? You're going to experience some challenges and struggles, and I've had my fair share. And I remember when I was a rookie, kind of trying to find my footing in the major leagues and like kind of really struggling to figure out if I belonged there. My manager, Joe Madden, who, if you're a Cub fan or a baseball fan, you might know that name. Joe came up to me pre-game one day and said, hey, I can tell you're really grinding. Grinding is a word we would use to say, like, you're working really hard, but you're obviously mentally, like, having a difficult time right now. And I was out pregame just working my tail off, trying to just survive in that moment. And he came out and said, hey, I want you to realize that I've been around for a very long time. I know you're new here, and you're a great player. There's a lot of good players in this league. It's tough. But he said, I've been around for a long time, and I've seen a lot of major league players. He said, you need to trust me when I tell you this. You're going to play in the major leagues for at least 10 years. And I remember at the time thinking when he said that, like, oh, this guy's just blowing smoke, he, like he's just trying to pump me up and help me through a tough moment. But he really believed that, and obviously it ended up coming true. But I think that's one of those moments, and that oftentimes I try to tell coaches, players, parents, sometimes you need to borrow belief from somebody around you when you don't have it. Your confidence level is not always going to be where you need it to be. This is why we have practitioners. This is why we have coaches. This is why we have teachers. We have adults or people that have been around before that can kind of help us through those moments and believe for us when we're really not feeling it. But another person I should probably say something about is my trainer, Josh Costello, who is one of my best friends. And Josh was with me through a very dark period of depression that I went through in 2007 when I was in the major leagues. And I'll never forget being in AAA, because this was a time in my career where I was bouncing up and down. You kind of feel like a designated yo-yo. You're a commodity to the organization. They're just pushing you here and there, and we need you to do this, we need you to do that. You don't really know what your life's going to be like. And I remember thinking, this is awful. Like, do I really want to do this? And so there's a lot of confusion and doubt of whether or not I was going to continue to play. And I remember feeling depressed, and it was not only affecting my sleep patterns, but it was affecting my level of being able to perform at the capability that I was able to perform at. Josh came up to visit me, and I remember being like I even was nervous enough and feeling enough depression that I asked if he would stay in the same hotel, we had a double bedroom. I was like, can you sleep in the other bed? I was like in a tough place, right? Like I was in a very difficult spot. And the next day I was like really struggling with wanting to go back to the field. And I remember I was kind of on the ground like crying, and he was praying with me because he's a faithful brother in Christ. And I remember him just putting his arm around me and just praying for me in that moment. And I was like a very, very weak individual in that moment. I felt weak, right? And I went on to that game. Here's the crazy thing. I went to that game, and before the first inning started, I was starting again. I have to like put on a face in the professional sports world and try to do all my pre-work. And the manager came to me before the first inning and said, hey, Zoe, you're going to be out of the lineup. And I was like, oh, thank the Lord. He's like, they're calling you back up to the big leagues. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? So it's like, this is how different the perception is from how it feels sometimes. And I remember calling Josh and being like, hey, can you come? I got to go to the airport and fly to, where was I at? Like Tampa Bay at the time or whatever. I was like, I got to fly down there. And I was like, could you just come pray with me in the hallway before we go? And so this is a guy that was training me physically in the off season. and then in season was coming to pray over me and help me kind of just get to the next moment, right? So I think there are people that sometimes you really just have to lean into, and obviously being one of those people is very important for people too. I knew I could trust Josh. I knew I could trust my dad. And we have to build that.
I love all of that. And just a quick tip on mentorship. I mean, just a high-level overview. If somebody doesn't have a mentor and they're looking for a mentor, do you have any advice to give on what to look for?
People that do not try to fix you. I think that's very difficult for men in general, especially if you're a male looking for a mentor. It's like, well, what are you dealing with? All right, well, let's attack this head on and let's get this fixed. And I think one thing that was great about Josh is he wasn't trying to move me out of it fast.
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't, I wouldn't call him a mentor. I would call him more of a friend than a mentor. But now the way I see any mentorship is, look, I might look for a professional mentor that's just giving me knowledge and information and experience in that profession. But if I'm looking for a mental health or a mental skills mentor, I need somebody that can understand that sometimes things just don't get fixed very quickly. You got to be patient with the process, and different people have different processes. So don't put me in your cookie cutter fixer, the way that you think that this ought to go and how quickly this ought to happen. Like, at least listen to me and just be with me. I might be asking for advice, but one of the things we do with Champion Forward is sometimes you have to explain to the person that you're asking to help you with something what you actually want from them. Do you want just to listen? Do you want me just to listen? Do you want engagement from me on the issue? Do you want some advice? Or maybe you want some accountability. You want something that strong. But you have to kind of know what you're looking for in regard to that, and then find the person that you know is really able to do that.
Love it, man. Thank you for sharing that. So switching to parents, obviously for all of those that are out there that are raising kids, it's or at least for myself, I'll speak for myself. It can be challenging at times, right? And so, oftentimes we hear parents ask, when a child is anxious or they're struggling, whether that's socially or facing team pressures, right? What responses from adults helped you feel safe and steady?
Well, let me just say, and my dad would admit to this too, there were plenty of times that we weren't talking about the thing that would have probably helped me on the way home. On the way home in the car ride, we were talking about, well, why did you do this in that play? Why did you do that? Like, it was questions about the game and about what I did or didn't do, as opposed to how did you feel about the game? Like, helping me kind of return to the human. It was like, hey, let's address how you weren't the hero you wanted to be for your team. Let me help kind of coach you a little bit more than the coaches were coaching you. I think it's really important for parents to recognize their role and that it's not a coaching role. And the parents that are coaches for their kids are in a very, very difficult spot because you have to know how to address something as a parent versus how to address it as a coach. And there are plenty of times where we get that wrong. I think we start to coach our kids because the coach isn't coaching them the way we want them to coach them. So we're like, well, are you doing this? Are you doing that? And that's just not what they need from us often. I think they need the ability then to start to transition to, like, how do I separate who I was out there on the field and what I was trying to do on the field from now I got to return to being just Ben, who doesn't have a uniform on, and I'm like trying to figure out how do I transition to, like, wait, I got schoolwork, I got to get ready for bed, I got to eat something, I got all the other routines that you kind of step back into after that. And so I think as a parent, one thing that is very challenging to do is not get emotionally tied into the public thing that just happened with your kid, because emotionally, when you see them struggling in a public realm, or you feel that they're struggling privately, you want to immediately go to coach mode. Well, do this, do that. If you do this, maybe it'll help fix that. And we want them to get better quickly. We want them to feel confident fast. But the way to do that is actually not by being the coach for them in that moment. It's actually learning to connect with them. If you can find a level of connection. So I don't look at now a challenging situation as a chance for you to help your kid get better from that. I look at it like, if you're a parent, this is my opportunity because my kid has experienced this challenge to connect with them in a different way, in a better way than I've never ever connected with them before. So if I can actually be with them in this and not try to fix it and get them past it really quickly so that they can feel better, but actually sit with them in it, hey, what do you think we should do? If they're asking for advice, okay, well, I'll give you a little bit of advice, but let's talk about how this feels for you. Because I think this is how I would feel, but I don't know. I'm not you. So you may be experiencing this in a very different way than I would. And by having those conversations around connecting with them emotionally and not trying to just move them quickly out of it, I think that's what ultimately parents want. When I talk to parents that their kid is at the end of their sports experience, their regret is not around whether they paid for this kid to get on that team or whether or not they gave them every opportunity to get to the next level. Their regret is their level of connection with their young person. Because they don't want to lose that. They're like grasping at that, like, wait, I don't want to lose that connection. So if we're so afraid of that.
That though, what causes that disconnect?
Well, some of it's natural, right? I mean, kids need to start to develop their own sense of identity apart from their family unit as they get older. And some of that is just their peer group becomes more important in their mind than their family unit at certain points. They always come back to their family unit, I think, like as they get older. I mean, we all kind of have, right? We all kind of go, wait, I want to reconnect with my parents in a way that you don't when you're a teenager. But regardless from that, I just think that it's just natural to try to find my own sense of identity. And so if that's normally going to happen, how do you stay connected as they're building their own sense of identity away from you with their friends and with their activities? You want to be the guide for them as they're doing that and stay connected to them so that as they develop, you're not like, they don't feel like you're trying to form them into this thing that you thought that they should be able to do by the time they were 18 or 20 or 25, right? And I think kids are very they see it and they feel it far more than we recognize that we're doing it as a parent. They're feeling like, oh gosh, dad's really trying to make me into this right now. And I want to please him, but also maybe I don't feel that same way that he does about that. And I struggle with that as a parent, just like anybody else. I want certain things for my kids that they might not want for themselves. And for them to grow up into a healthy human being, they've got to want it for themselves. So I want to be a guide to help them find the things that motivate them that are healthy. And to help them say, hey, that thing that you think should be very motivating right now, or maybe is motivating you, let's just ask some questions about that. Let's get curious. Ask good questions, you get better answers.
No, I love that. And going back to I don't know if there's individuals in the audience that have kids that are kind of at that point where they're exiting their sports, right? And they may have some of that regret. Is there any tools or suggestions that you have for them if they're navigating that right now?
It's never too late to start healthy connection, in my opinion. You have to start now. If you feel like I have struggled with this, I've messed this up. I mean, that's one thing that is a blessing about sports for me is I may not have a great memory. So those of you that know me well know I forget very quickly, but I stay very, very present. So if I'm like, yeah, I may have struggled with my kids last week or yesterday, today is a new day. They're dealing with this today. How do I connect with them today on this issue? How do I do it better today than I did yesterday? Sometimes I have to apologize for what I did yesterday to start the day to kind of have a clean slate. But at the end of the day, it's staying present with what are they dealing with right now and how can I help guide and healthily connect with them as they're going through whatever the thing they're going through.
Appreciate that, man. Can you share a moment when character versus outcome became real for you and how families can model that at home?
Yeah, so one thing that was very helpful in balancing for me my youth sports experience or as I was growing up to be a young person is at a certain age, my dad was like, hey, we're not playing on Sunday. My dad's a pastor of a church, so we just didn't do anything on Sunday. And in our small town, frankly, we just didn't schedule tournaments on Sunday. So the youth sports experience now, like I said, is very different. Almost all tournaments, if you want to win the tournament, you're playing 3 or 4 games on Sunday to win the tournament. So it's almost impossible to skip those games, if your team's counting on you, you want to be a part of that team, it's like you got to be able to play on Sunday. Well, there was a certain age that my parents were like, no, we're not doing that. And then there was a certain age that my dad was like, hey, you know what the priorities are for our family. You know that your faith and your family should come before your sports experience. That being said, if you have a game, a Legion baseball game or whatever the team I was playing for at the time, you have a game on Sunday and you are going to come to Sunday school or you're going to go to Wednesday church or you're going to come to Sunday night, I know you're going to be there, then go do your thing. You don't have to be at everything we do at the church. We're not going to be like legalistic in regard to that is the word he used at the time. So I think that was helpful for me in balancing that, like, yeah, you can have a priority of faith and family and still go do these things that you want to be on this team. You can do that. Now it's a lot more challenging because it's like, oh, if I'm not all in, I'm going to miss out on this scholarship, this experience, like this team. I won't be able to be a part of that. Well, let me tell you, there's enough scouts, there's enough opportunities out there that if you're good enough, the opportunity will find you. Some opportunity will find you to keep playing at the next level if you're good enough. Back then, you may have been able to make a case that, like, well, if you don't go play here, you're not going to get drafted. I didn't get drafted out of high school. I didn't even have college scholarships coming out of high school. But for me, that was another moment that my parents were like, hey, it's not important that you play college sports. We want you to find God's will. That's what they used to say. Just find God's will for your life, which meant it may not be in sports, and they were okay with that. So if there are parents out there that are like dead set on my kid is an athlete and they've got to make at least a college scholarship, what if they decide that that's not for their future? Are you going to be okay with that? I think we have to be okay with sometimes the pathway for our kids is not the pathway that we thought it was going to be. And they have to lead that at a certain age. I'm not saying that age is 12, 13 years old, but I am saying by the time they get towards the end of high school, they should start to be able to have some independence in some of the decisions they make. And that's for every family to decide on their own, like how they do that. But for me, that's a very important part of their development is learning to start to make some of those own. And that balance, for me, helped me realize, like, I get to decide how much of this is going to be a part of my life. I think the second answer that I have to say this too. When we won the World Series in 2016, a big part of me seeing that the outcomes, even though I would have always said the outcomes don't define this, it's more about who you are. Like as an athlete, everybody treats you better if the outcome's better. Think about it. Like, I mean, it's not rocket science. They treat you differently if you play good versus if you play bad. So the message I'm hearing as a young person going into professional sports always is you're more valuable when you win. If that's the message that we're constantly receiving from the world around us, what do you need in order to figure out a different way? Well, number one, you need people that aren't going to talk to you that way. So I had some people in my life that naturally were like, I don't care what your stats are. How are you as a human being? So I had friends, family members that would ask me that. But at the same time, they got really excited when things were good too. When I finally got that World Series championship, whatever it was, that was the time that I realized, okay, I got everything I wanted to get out of this. Everybody else is getting everything they want to get out of this. I'm not at peace. I don't like this right now. So the experience I was having while we were winning was different than what everybody else thought it should be. And so there has to be this recognition that who I am is separated, and what I feel is separate from what I'm able to do, what I'm able to accomplish. And so if you're winning, awesome. I'm happy for you. That's going to bring a lot of blessings into your life. If you're losing, awesome. This is a great opportunity for you to learn who you are in this moment, what you really want out of this. You know, I don't look at success and failure as one's good, one's bad. No more. Like it's literally the outcome is going to help me learn something new. So we have something in Champion Forward we talk about that is our framework. It's a tool that we talk about with success. How do you start to learn stuff that you need to be learning not just in failure, but also in success. Like, success is just as much of a challenge as failure is. It's just a different kind of challenge. You know that, right? Like, we've both experienced this level of like, people look at you differently. You're famous. You're on TV. You're this or that. But at the end of the day, it's not about what they see. It's about how you feel, right? It's about how you're developing as a human being, whatever's coming at you, whether it's success or failure.
Well, I love that you brought that up, and I want to ask you that is when you're in this moment, when people think that this is, the highlight of your life, right? It's this persona that's being put on, but internally, you're not feeling that way at all. It's a big part of my story. What was the first thing when you created that awareness around that? What was the first thing you did to address what was going on underneath?
Well, my sleep was massively struggling. It was obvious like I was starting to really, really struggle behind the curtain. And I knew it was time to finally start talking to a therapist. I did not do therapy before that, really. Like, I had done a few sessions here or there with anxiety, but until it became that difficult, that's when I was like, okay, this is beyond what it should be. And that's where it starts to feel like it's too late, right? It's never too late to go and start doing that. But I should have been proactive, or I wish I would have been doing some of this work ahead of time. So now what I would suggest for people is, if it's bad, you need to go talk to a professional as soon as possible. And you need to get with somebody you're comfortable with. You need to start doing that regularly. You need to start to understand what patterns led you there. But if you are just starting to feel a level of anxiety or a level of like, I just don't feel great about this right now, there are plenty of opportunities to start just becoming aware with some check-in stuff. I mean, that's part of why we do basic check-ins with our program. You need to, if you're a support system for somebody or you're struggling with something, it's just knowing where is the safe place or the safe person I can go to say, hey, I'm actually feeling this. Yes, I know I had a great game or whatever. I'm getting good grades. Everything looks great, but I'm actually feeling this right now. To be truly authentic with what's going on, not with what everybody thinks should be going on, but what is truly going on. And it's difficult as a parent for kids to do that with you because they know that your emotions often are tied to their success or failure. So they don't want, if you're happy about the success they're having, they don't want to bring you down. So we have to create this place where, hey, I know you had some success or you had failure, but how are you really feeling? Like at the end of the day, what do you feel like you need right now that you don't have? Is there something that's missing right now that, like, if we're just ready for those moments and those conversations, I feel like that's what I'm trying to do every day with the people I'm close to, my inner circle. It's like, I'm feeling this right now. This is how I'm feeling. And then I'm doing regular therapy once a week, personally. So I think that those two things are an incredible place to start.
I love that. And on that note, I'm curious, when you're approaching and creating those clear lines of communication for your children, do you ever approach it from the aspect of also sharing what it is that you're going through? Because I'm a firm believer of by expressing vulnerability, it creates humility, not only with friends, your peers, and other people, but I've started doing that with my kids at age appropriateness, right? I'm not done my daughter that's 8, some of the things that I'm really going through in life, but I am relating and creating a sense of connection with her, which is developing a sense of safety. Do you do that? And if so, can you express or elaborate on the importance that you see from that?
Well, that's 100%. So very important. I mean, modeling it is the number one thing that you can do outside of saying or creating a safe space is like you have to be doing it for yourself. They need to see you doing that, right? So if I tell my kids I need something from them and I never say, I'm struggling with this too, then they're just like, well, they see themselves very different from you. They have a very difficult time. I am trying to be overly, I try not to overshare like you, at age-appropriate times. However, there's a good chance there's a lot of things they're already exposed to that you don't know about. So if they're already exposed to certain things and you've been through certain things, who better to get their information from than their primary caretakers on how you wish you would have done this differently? If you struggled with this or you struggled with that, hey, You know, you don't have to tell them every detail, but like just at least say, hey, this was a struggle for me. This has been a struggle for me. I'm still working through this. I want you to find a way to do this at an earlier age so that you can be better off than I have been. You know, I want you to have every resource, everything available so that you can thrive, you know, and that's the only way for me to do that truly, and for them to feel that from me, is that I don't have it figured out, so you don't have to have it figured out. I try to say that to high school kids a lot. You don't have to have it figured out. Contrary to popular belief, everybody else knows where they're going to school, everybody else knows what their job's going to be, everybody else has a perfect life. No, they don't, and you don't have to have it figured out right now. So we'll walk through this together, and it takes a long time, longer than it used to grow up and actually feel comfortable in your own skin and figuring out what you're made for in this world.
Love it, bro. And I think it's so important that we address it in that way, shape, or form, because kind of going to the next question is kids this day and age are just facing a whole new landscape, right? I mean, in the way that they're navigating life, again, when it comes to social media, you know, comparison and performance pressures. We experienced that when we were younger, but not at the level that it is today, at least not in my experience. So what's one practical boundary or routine that you could recommend for families and or parents that are going through this right now?
Yeah, well, I obviously think about having conversations with your family on what your priorities are and sticking to that regardless of the cultural pressure or the pressure of the activities that they're involved in. Because there's always going to be some parent that seems like they're doing better, they're more involved, they're able to do everything so much better than I can. Listen, you got to have your own priorities, and you do things in your home the way you feel called to do that, you know. And I think obviously having tech-free space and tech-free time there's clear indication that that's healthier, and finding ways to do that. I mean, it's a challenge. Look, I'm struggling with it with my kids, finding how do I like give them access but not all access, you know. So this is a challenge on a regular basis. But I also think that finding a level of routine that makes them feel purpose, which, you know, there's plenty of evidence that just giving them jobs at home, even though they don't like it and they'll complain about it, is healthy. So give them something and don't clean up for them. Don't do it for them, right? It's like we want to just have a clean house, or we want to have things in order, and you give them a job and they drop the ball. Well, don't pick it up. Don't pick it up. Say, hey, this isn't happening unless you do it. Because I think what that does for them is it gives them a sense of purpose in the home. If everything is done for them perfectly and they don't contribute to anything, they just show up and eat food and leave and go do their activity, then they're like, well, I don't really have a purpose here. But if you're like, hey, I need you to do this, and if you don't do it, nobody's doing it, yeah, they're going to complain. They don't want to do it. But it's actually the thing that gives them a sense of purpose more than anything. And I'm forgetting, John knows the book that came from. Who was the? Yes, Never Enough by Jennifer Brennan Wallace. She talks about that in that book, that kids need to feel purpose in the home, and part of the way they feel purpose is to have jobs. So let them have a job and don't help them with it.
So good, man. So good. Well, for me, I want to talk about your moment of clarity. Obviously, you experienced a lot in your career, just in life. What was that moment of clarity, whether it was through you, your friends, people around you, where you decided that, hey, enough is enough and I need to get help?
Well, I was at the end of myself. You know, I think you know, what my hope is for people that are struggling with depression or anxiety. Like I had a moment for me right after the World Series when we won in 2016, and I was on a plane to go back to Chicago to be the parade marshal in the Festival of Lights, one of the largest parades that Chicago does. The Festival of Lights parade, which happens right about now. You know, next week or something is probably when it's happening up there. And I was going to be the parade marshal, right? Like on the opening float for this. Thousands of people down the streets of Michigan Avenue and all this stuff. And I get on a plane from Nashville to go back up there, and I was sleeping very little, like I said, after all this stuff took place. And I had a panic attack. It's like, Like, I almost stopped the plane on the runway at BNA. There was some foreign guy sitting next to me who didn't even speak English. He's like, hey, like he pulls the stewardess over, like this guy's about to pass out, and they gave me some orange juice and I came back alive, Sunny D commercial. And at that point, I was like, this is not good. Like, I am not in a healthy place. I was like, this is not good. Like, I almost stopped this plane. And then that would have been a news story. World Series MVP for the Cubs, stops plane on the runway from a panic attack. But this is like reality. This is what I was really going through deep down. And that was like, I've got to get some help. Like, this is not normal. This doesn't feel right. It was no longer just a sleep issue, because I had gone to a sleep doctor and the doctor's like, well, you're healthy as a horse, I'm sure it'll come back to normal, It was like, it wasn't coming back to normal because of what was going on up here. And I didn't know how to articulate that. I didn't have the language. I didn't have the emotional language. I didn't have the cognitive language. I hadn't talked to therapists at the time. I needed to figure out a healthy way to experience that extreme level of success and the extreme levels of doubt and failure that I was riding that roller coaster. And people ride it in all sorts of ways, right? We all ride it in our various ways, whether it's as a parent at home or in the business world or in the athletic world. We're all riding a wave at various times. But if you have no place and no person that you can actually say authentically what's actually happening for me, this is what's going to happen. It's residing in you, and it will come out sideways at some level. And I started to realize through therapy that I actually, this isn't me. Like, these thoughts, this challenge, I don't have to take an identity with what's happening with me. I can actually express it, and that was the point where it started to get less. Just getting it out.
While you were going through this, did people around you not really recognize what was going on? Was there denial? What was the piece? Because obviously seems like it was super severe to get you to a place of where you were at. Did the people around you not see what was going on?
Once again, I was really good at being stoic and get to the next moment. So when there's a lot of moments happening and it's like, I don't know what to do with this one, I would just remain strong like a good athletic man does. Just be strong and move into the next moment. That actually, I just don't see that as strength anymore. I see that as you're weak in the fact that you don't know how to get inside. You don't know how to look in the mirror enough. You're avoiding through that stoicism instead of actually addressing the challenges that are going on in you. And I'm not saying you say it to everybody. I don't think you need to go to work and say, hey guys, let's stop what we're doing. I need to check in. This is not realistic, right? I would never tell an athlete, you need to check in the middle of the game. It's not the time. You have to move into the next moment. If you want to be great, you have to be great in the moment that you're asked to be a hero. But where in your world do you have the place to drop down and actually check in and figure out who you are, what you are going through, what has Ben going through, the person that's inside the uniform?
Yeah. No, that's so good. Because the second piece I wanted to ask to that is for parents or students that are going through it. How can you help normalize that discussion or that conversation so it doesn't have to get to that point where you're having to do the OJ commercial?
Yeah. Well, I think it helps, guys like you sharing your story and the ways that we did not get it right, the things that we wish we would have done differently. I think that helps. Also, we need parents and coaches and people that are primary and secondary caretakers of young people modeling it. This is normal. It's normal for us to check in. It's normal for us to go to therapy. It's normal for us to have priorities that kind of make me feel like I'm missing out. Guess what? It's good to miss out sometimes. It's good to I'm okay missing a tournament. I'm okay not turning the TV on, staring at a wall. Hey, guess what? Boredom leads to creativity. So why don't we get bored for a little while? Let's make that popular again. It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to get in that space without a lot of resistance. There's a lot of distraction and a lot of resistance. So we have to be aggressive in our pursuit of health and aggressive in our pursuit of I want this for me. I want this for me and I want it for you too. because you're growing up and there's going to be even more distraction. You guys have even more challenges than I had as a kid. So I want to help us like get rid of the distraction for the moment and have some time to just be creative and find some things that we love, like do some different things that we don't normally do. Let's get uncomfortable and get comfortable with that place, because when we do that, you find the things that give you true rest. Nature walks, things that like we know have scientific evidence of giving us a healthier mindset and a more balanced perspective outside of this see me Instagram, Twitter world, like where everything is about see what I'm doing, the content I'm creating. Like, how about the person I am becoming? Right? It's more about becoming. What do I want to become? How do I want to be in this world, as opposed to what do I want to show people that I can do in this world? Let's be healthy instead of like showing that we can be great at something. Like, excellence needs to take a back seat to health, in my opinion. If we do that well, then our kids will start to realize it's valuable.
Amen, brother. Let's make boredom cool again. I like that. So look, obviously the work that you're doing with Champion Forward, which I absolutely love, and I think it's so needed. I'm curious, between you and John, what are some of the things that you're seeing within the communities, just like Williamson County, that they should be paying attention to?
Yeah, John can probably answer that question even better than I can, but from my perspective, you have to pay attention to the tension that you are feeling as a parent. If it doesn't feel right to you, it's probably not right for you. So it may be, like, let's not judge what somebody else's family wants to do and how they want to do it, or what this program, what they expect of their athletes or their parents, or what the school system expects. Let's find a way to say, well, is this working for me and for our family? If it's not working for you, it's not working for your family. It might be working for you. If it's not working for your student, it's not working for your family. So check in with everybody in the family, like, is this working for us? Is this working for me? If it's not, if there's something that just doesn't quite feel right, pay attention to that and follow that thread. Because what we're seeing in Champion Forward is that there are far more people that are feeling that something isn't right than there are resources out there to address it in the common person's world. Like in the therapeutic world, there's so many great resources and help that people are taking advantage of, but there's not enough of you. As you know, like if you're a therapist, there's not enough. We need more therapists. We need more opportunities, more money infused into the mental health world so that more therapists can meet the needs that are out there, because the lines are long. Refuge, I've been around the Refuge for a long time. The lines are very long. There are more people that want help than have the ability to get it. So that means that the layperson like ourselves, we got to be able to do something to be a bridge to get them, help in the short term, to just, okay, if you're in a really tough place, yes, we got to get you to therapy. You have to know where you begin and end. We're not therapists. We always say that. We're not mental health people. But we know them, and we can do some small things to help provide safe spaces in our realm. So we hear ambassadors come and say, something's wrong with the youth sports world. Whether it's a coach, or if they see that something's wrong and they want to figure it out, we're like, let's do this together. Let's find a way to address these problems and hit them head on together. And so John and I did a lot of research around like what isn't out there. What is something we can do? What's a gap we can stand in? And emotional skills is something every person can learn, beyond what you already know. I wish that they would teach it in school systems. Social emotional learning is so important, and there's not enough money in the public school systems to have groups like, come in and address that. So schools are spending money on that, especially private schools. They can spend more money on that, which is nice. But that being said, we're hearing these parents are asking for this. Coaches are asking for, like, give us some tools to have these conversations with our kids, because they're struggling, we're struggling, we don't know what decisions to make. NIL, the money that has been infused into the youth market, we're trying to address that, but we need more help. Our organization needs more help. The mental health world needs more therapists. If you're doing that, thank you so much. But there are more young people that need to be stepping into these realms so that we can meet the needs that are out there in our society.
I love that. John, do you want to add anything, that themes that you guys are seeing, just as people are working with Champion Forward, that they should be aware of?
Lack of clarity for what they truly desire for their child.
Did you guys hear that? Really good, John. Appreciate that, brother. Ben, in closing, before we have a few minutes for question and answer, if you could leave the audience with one small, consistent practice that builds resilience over time, what would that be?
Well, it's check-ins. I mean, that's a simple answer. I always say connection to yourself, connection to God, and connection to others. That's what I want for my kids. I want you to have a healthy connection to yourself, a healthy connection to God, and a healthy connection to others. Look, I get other people have different faith worlds, and they have a different way of thinking through that than I do. So I would not pressure somebody or pressure my kids that they have to have the same connection with God that I do. But I think it's important for me to try to find my ways to connect with God every day. I think it's important to try to find ways to check in with myself before I even check in with people that I'm close to. What am I actually feeling right now? Something just doesn't feel right. I feel discontent with this. I feel like I'm not happy with that. And if I do that hard work, which is hard work, let's be honest, it's hard work to check in with yourself. You got lots of different feelings throughout the day. But if I try to take something, we use a model of movement in our organization, but I try to do a check-in with myself through that, which gets me to some clarity around what I'm asking a therapist to do for me later in the week. So I'll be checking in with myself. This is something that keeps bothering me, it keeps coming up. I'm going to write this down, and then I'm bringing it up to my guy on Thursdays to say, hey, this is what I really want to talk about because this thing keeps coming up for me. And then we can actually, instead of spending 45 minutes with me just talking all over the place, and then he's like, yeah, let's get to that in the last 5 minutes here, It's like I spend 5 or 10 minutes saying, I've already been thinking about this, and this is what I want to do, and I'm bringing that into my therapeutic time, and he's like, okay, well, let's talk more about that then. You've already given me clarity on what you're feeling and what it's tied to, and I get through that in 5 or 10 minutes, which is great, because then it leaves 35 minutes to get his advice, his help on kind of dissecting that from a more of a cognitive or a therapeutic realm.
I love that. I think it's something that I've learned in my program, in my journey, whether it be substance abuse or mental health, is identifying some of those key things that you can incorporate, because consistency and structure create safety. And again, look at it as from a child's perspective, from a newborn. You look at when they have their structure and their consistency, they tend to be in a much better place. When that is disrupted, you can see the effects of that, and there's no difference as adults. So you did a fantastic job, brother. I appreciate your insight and just your knowledge around all of this and just being so open and vulnerable. You got such a big heart, man, and so much to offer. And but before we leave, I want to open it up to the audience for questions. Anything that is coming to mind. I don't think there's really anything off basis or off topic here, right? So,
yeah,
let her rip. Any questions? And don't be shy either. I'll just call on somebody. Let's go, brother.
I have a question. And this involves baseball. Baseball is just known for players who have very public slumps, and the pressure on players every day. When you watch a game, he's been 0 for 17 or whatever. When you had a slump, was there a practice that you used to get over it, not just physically but mentally?
I would overwork. To be honest, that's what I would address that at the time with, I'm gonna spend extra time physically. Well, that worked for a certain period of my life when I had the physical ability to do extra work, because I could feel more confident if I did this extra work, knowing okay, now I'm a little clearer on the physical tendencies I'm struggling with, and I'm gonna fix this in the cage, fix this off the field, so that next time I perform, but that works only for a certain time for athletes, because if you have an injury where you have to you don't have as much energy in that moment, or you have back-to-back games and you just don't have the time to get in a cage, there's some mental skills that I think athletes can do that can help rehearse erase some of what took place and rehearse it in a different way. So one of the things that strong visualization techniques that I would walk athletes through would be, okay, let's go back and let's play that tape back. So you play the tape back of what happened. How does that feel? Okay, we're talking about that. Now let's assume you do something different. What would you have done different? Let's rewind and let's create a new tape. See yourself succeeding. Maybe it's succeeding by doing nothing. Maybe you're not swinging at that pitch that you swung through. Maybe it's I'm catching that ball and I'm turning the double play and it's working out and I'm hitting the first baseman right in the chest. It's literally like I'm going to play a tape. What I saw, I'm going to choose to see something different. And so whenever the old tape starts to play, you hit stop, you put the new tape in and say, no, this is the tape that I'm going to replay. And I know that I'm capable of this. This is where like confidence comes in. If you know you're capable versus you keep playing an old tape where you see yourself failing, of course you're going to start to doubt more. So you have to start to play a new tape. I know I've done this before. I know I can do this. Let me play that tape and then start to get some language. I always talk to kids about self-talk is another, besides visualization, self-talk is another mental performance indicators that the Chicago Cubs mental skills work towards. How do I have different self-talk instead of, yeah, I stink or I stunk like in that moment? No, I know what I did and I can fix that. I can do this. I can do that. Not I like don't look in the past. Say something self-talk to where you're telling yourself what you can do.
Do you have a question in the back up there? No?
Just waving.
Yeah, just waving. Yes, ma'am.
Three-tiered question, actually. So you mentioned being a PK. So when you're a chairman of the Deacon Board, Kay, which is worse, we were told that we were at church more than the PKs all day.
I'm sorry, you said we were at church what?
More than the PKs.
Okay.
So dealing with that, first of all, as an obstacle for some time, how do we incorporate that into, well, let's lead into also our culture, right? Black culture does not believe in therapy, psychiatrists, medication. Black culture believes in go to God about it and he'll fix it, or he'll either fix your situation or he'll fix you in that situation. And so add that into having an athlete that's a male cheerleader in the realm of cheerleaders being female cheerleaders for the most part and being looked upon as that being different. So how does a parent get to the point of deciding when a kid or child needs therapy and before something really goes wrong, and combating all of the cultural and religious and other things that they might have to deal with, on top of the parent not, going through the things of having to know about therapy and psychiatry and those things?
Yeah, that's a very complicated question, I think, and I don't want to speak with any authority other than to say your commitments as the chair of the Deacon Board are noble and honorable, and obviously your young person is going to feel a sense of I'm in this family, I have to be there too, like we have to represent what my parents are involved in. Right, so I got to be there, and people are watching. Like a hawk, they're watching what your young person's doing. I think the best way that I would address that, if that was me, is I would be like, hey, you don't need to feel the pressure that I feel for this position, because this is a calling between God and me. This is something that I'm called to do. And yes, as a family, we're going to attend, and I'm going to ask you to attend as my young person. But at the same time, you are different, and you will grow up and have your own values. So let's talk about what my feelings are around other people in the community. Because I think I would lean more into, outside of even a faith realm, I would lean more into the community experience than I would into my faith experience in regard to that. Because what you're experiencing in that community is a level of pressure, a level of outward pressure that we've got to do it this way or that way. Whereas, like, sometimes that feels trapping. You know, it feels like a trap to a lot of people. Like, I've got to do it this way. Whereas, you know, your calling is your calling. We as a family feel really confident that this is what we want to do, you know, but at the same time, you're going to be a different person. So if you're struggling with that and you have some feelings about that and you're an athlete or you're a different kind of athlete than what people are used to, then let's figure out how you can get comfortable with what you're feeling in your own skin so that we're confident. We walk into church, we walk into whatever that realm is. I know that I'm doing between me and God and me and my parents what is right for me. You know, because that confidence doesn't come from looking all around at what they're thinking about what I'm doing. That's a lot of codependence behavior, in my opinion, happens with, I got to make sure that everybody else is okay with what I'm doing right now. And I just don't think that that's the healthiest view of community. I think the healthiest view of community is, hey, I'm going to lean into you, you lean into me. I'm going to let you have the freedom to have your opinions and differences, and I respect that, and I'm going to give you the independence to make choices away from what I think. Like, I can love you and also disagree with you. That's very difficult to do inside of a church context. I can speak from personal experience on that. I love you, but I wouldn't do it that way, and that's okay. So I can support you without agreeing that you have to do it that way, because me and my family, we've decided between us and God, we're going to do it this way. With my child, with my young person, this is the best decision for them, in my opinion. And that's very difficult in the face of a lot of pressure that sometimes we can feel from people we also care about. You know, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be the people you're raising to be adults as 30, 40-year-old people. Like, we still want to be connected and in our kids' lives as they're having kids of their own. So if we want that, we got to start when they're very young and they're trying to figure out who they are. We want to build that healthy connection with them. And if that means that other people don't like it, they got to be okay with that. We got to be okay with that. Like, I got to be okay with somebody that I love not being okay with the decisions I make for my life. You know, and I hope that there can still be connection, even if you can disagree about the best decision in the short term. I get it. Like, leaders of churches, leaders of organizations, there's a lot of difficult decisions that have to be made. And that is a tough spot to be in. And I laud you for taking that post. That being said, it's going to take a real strong person to be clear on, this is where my post for this church begins and ends. You know, you got to do what you got to do for your church, and you got to do what you got to do for your family. And if someone says, hey, you can't be in this post because you're making that decision for your family, I'd always say, choose your family before the post. That's my personal opinion of that.
We got time for a quick one. Anybody got one quick question? Let's go, brother.
How do you talk about sort of grieving the end of this, not career, but like just playing sports? I work with young people with substance use disorders, and mom and dad are always kind of like, you played baseball or you played football and then you got hurt and you just didn't get to play anymore. And we see them not able to grieve this process and step into the next thing. How do you sort of think about that or talk about that with a young person?
I think you said it, grieving well is very difficult to do, no matter what you're losing. And I think we have to realize that a kid that's done at the end of high school or a kid that's done at the end of college, they're not losing a 4-year high school career. They're losing a 14-year identity or an 18-year identity that they've lived since they were 4 or 5 years old. That's who they saw themselves as, especially as a young person. If other people saw them as a good athlete, like that formed a lot of their identity. Regardless of that they had priorities and faith in their family, you're spending so much time doing that one activity, and that's how your peers see you, and that's how you see yourself. It's going to be a grieving process to lose that part of your identity or transform it. You may not have to fully lose it, because then you can still become a coach, or you can be in a recreational mode for that, but that is a grief process, I think, that is different for different people. For me, it was like a process of, I need to go cold turkey away from this for a couple years. I literally like didn't turn the TV on and watch baseball. I was like, I got to figure out who I am without a uniform on. So I didn't do anything with sports. John knows this. It was with him that I started even the conversation of how do I get back involved in the sports world. I didn't want to go to the Wrigley Field. I didn't want to go anywhere around it until I knew how I wanted to re-enter that sports realm on a public scale. And so for kids, it might be a time of like rediscovering. I tell young people that are just done with something, I say, go do a lot of different things that are healthy. See what you like and don't like about those activities. And then try to tie, if you found something you really like, tie something that you're doing that you really like to something you really liked about your sport. Because when I've gone back, I realized I wasn't a player. I wasn't a utility player or a second baseman or a left fielder or a switch hitter. I wasn't that. I was more of a tinkerer in the batting cage than I was a position on the field. So I learned I can tinker on a whiteboard. I like to try to visioneer a new nonprofit organization. Like going in the batting cage, I could go with John and we could work on this and well, what if we try this? What if we try that? That's what I was doing with my physical swing that I loved in baseball. And then I would go out on the field and have this now this is where I can see if my experiment's going to work. Same thing with building this as an entrepreneur with John. It was let's try this. Let's think about that. Do you think this will work? Do you think that'll work? And as we've grown as an organization, we're starting to realize what does work and what doesn't work. And that's the beauty of an identity forming, is trying different things and going, as we have tried new things, I realize where I fit as a young person. I realize I really love this, or I really fit here. I'm really able to serve people in this way, and I love this. That's what I hope for young people that are transitioning out of sports, is that they can see what they loved about the sport actually can be translated to a job or another role. That's what I would hope for them.
So good. Well, Ben, again, thank you so much
Thank you for having me.
taking the time and just Find Hope Franklin, and thank you everybody for being here and taking the time to educate yourselves and for all of us to try to continue to do better. We're stronger together, and thank you everybody for having us. Hope you have a good day.
Let's
Thanks,
give them
everybody.
a round of applause.